When I first moved into that little rental house outside of Albany, I didn't think much of it. It was the kind of place you take when you're short on options. Cheap, a bit run down, but livable. The landlord was an older guy, friendly enough, but there was something about the way he kept urging me to make myself at home. He seemed almost relieved that I agreed to rent it so quickly. I brushed it off at the time. The place had 2 bedrooms. I only really needed one, but I figured the extra space would be good for storage. I set up in the larger room and used the second as a kind of spare. The closet in there was a little strange, though. It was deep, unusually deep, but one wall looked off. The drywall wasn't flush with the others, like someone had slapped it up in a hurry. The texture was wrong, too, smoother than the rest of the room. When I asked about it, the landlord just muttered something about a repair from years back. I let it go, but that closet would stick in the back of my mind for the next 3 months. At first, nothing unusual happened. The nights were quiet, and I was usually too tired from work to notice anything odd. But slowly I began hearing faint noises at night, not the usual creaks and groans of an old house. These were different, a soft, dragging sound, occasionally a muffled thump. Always faint, always when I was lying in bed, half asleep. I told myself it was pipes or maybe animals in the walls, but there was something deliberate about the sounds, like someone trying not to be heard. One night, just as I was drifting off, I heard it clearly. 3 sharp knocks, coming from inside that closet wall. My body went stiff. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the dark ceiling until the sound stopped. The next morning, I laughed it off, because what else could I do? But I couldn't shake the feeling. That's when I bought a Ring camera. I set it up in the hallway, angled so it caught the closet door. It felt paranoid, but I needed proof that the noises weren't just in my head. For 2 nights, nothing. But on the 3rd, at around 3 a.m., I woke to a notification. The clip showed the closet door. At first it was still. Then the handle began to turn. Not a jiggle, not like it was loose. It turned slowly, like someone inside was testing it. It never opened. After a few seconds, the handle went still again. I sat in bed with my phone in my hand, heart pounding, replaying the footage over and over. The next day, I couldn't focus at work. All I could think about was that closet. That evening, I moved everything out of the guest room. Boxes, furniture, everything. I pulled a chair in front of the closet and just stared at the wall. The drywall was newer than the rest, and up close I noticed something I'd missed before. A faint rectangular outline, a door frame, sealed over. My stomach sank. I told myself not to mess with it, but by midnight I was back in there with a hammer. Every swing echoed through the house, flakes of drywall coating the floor. It took nearly half an hour, but finally I broke through. Behind it was a hidden room. It was small, maybe 6 by 8 feet. The air that poured out was damp and stale, like it had been sealed for years. Inside there was an old mattress stained yellow and brown, food wrappers scattered on the floor, and in the corner an old camcorder set up on a tripod. It was pointed at a hole in the wall, a hole that looked straight into my bedroom. I staggered back, my throat dry. Somebody had lived in there. Somebody had been watching me. I didn't even want to touch the camcorder, but I forced myself to pick it up. It was dead, the battery long gone. I set it down and left the room, slamming the closet door shut and wedging the chair under the knob. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every creak of the house made me jolt upright. The next morning, I called the landlord. When I explained what I'd found, his voice changed immediately, tight, nervous. He muttered something about it being left from a previous tenant. When I asked if he knew about the hidden room, he stammered, then hung up on me. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. That night, I left the Ring camera running again. At around 4 a.m., I woke to another notification. The footage made my stomach drop. The closet door was wide open, and in the corner of the frame, standing perfectly still, was a figure. Tall, thin, motionless, just watching. After about 8 seconds, the clip cut off. When I opened the live feed, the hallway was empty. The closet door was shut. I grabbed my keys, left the house, and didn't look back. I didn't bother taking any of my things. I drove straight to a friend's place and stayed there for weeks. When I finally worked up the nerve to call the landlord again, he never answered. To this day, I don't know if he knew someone was in that house or if he was covering for them. But what I can't stop thinking about, what keeps me awake at night, is the ring footage. That figure, standing in my hallway, perfectly still, watching my bedroom and the way the door looked in the last second of the clip. It wasn't closing. It was being pulled shut from the inside. That's where I left it. No police report, no closure. Because part of me is afraid, terrified actually, that if I dig any deeper, I'll find out whoever was in that room still hasn't left. I've lived alone in a small townhouse for about 4 years. It's nothing special, but it's mine. The neighborhood isn't the best, but it's quiet enough and I usually feel safe. About a year ago, I decided to install a ring camera by the front door. Not because anything had happened, but because I worked nights, and I liked the idea of being able to check my phone and make sure everything was fine while I was gone. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Notifications about packages, the occasional stray cat walking across the porch, sometimes kids cutting through the yard. But one night in early spring, it caught something I can't explain. I was at work, an overnight shift, when my phone buzzed around 2:30 in the morning. Motion detected. I opened the live feed. There was a man standing at my front door. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't trying to open it. He was just standing there, staring straight into the camera. His face was half-shadowed, but what I could see didn't look right. His expression was blank, mouth slightly open, eyes wide. He didn't move at all, not even a shift in weight, just frozen there. I felt this wave of dread hit me even though I was miles away. I sat at my desk at work, watching this man stand at my door for almost 2 full minutes before he finally turned and walked out of frame. The next morning, when I got home, I checked the footage again. He had stayed on my porch for nearly an hour. Sometimes he would step out of frame, then come back. Other times he would lean forward, pressing his face closer to the camera, like he was trying to peer inside. But the worst part came about 40 minutes in. The man crouched down and crawled out of frame. The motion sensor stopped recording after that, and I never saw him leave. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me jump. But by the next day I convinced myself it was a random trespasser, maybe drunk or on something. Except a week later it happened again. Same time, around 2:30 in the morning. Another notification, and there he was. This time, he wasn't standing at the door. He was off to the side of the porch, half hidden like he thought the camera couldn't see him. He crouched there for nearly 20 minutes, just waiting. At one point, he pulled something out of his jacket. A phone, I thought. But when I zoomed in, I realized it wasn't a phone. It was a key, and he kept running it along the edge of my door frame like he was testing the lock. I called the police, but by the time they came, he was gone. They told me to keep the footage and call again if he came back. For a while, he didn't. Weeks passed, and I started to think maybe it was over. Until one night in May, another notification. Except this time, the clip didn't start with him outside the door. It started with him inside, standing in my hallway. The Ring camera caught him because I had another one set up inside, facing the living room. At 3:04 a.m., the feed showed him stepping out of my kitchen. He just stood there, swaying slightly as if listening. Then, without a sound, he walked slowly down the hall, toward my bedroom. When I saw that clip the next morning, my stomach dropped. I replayed it again and again, my hands shaking. But there was no footage of him leaving, no clip of the front door opening, no clip of him walking out. The police searched the house, the attic, even the crawl space, but found nothing. They suggested maybe the footage was corrupted or glitched. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard that night, when I woke up to the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway, and convinced myself it was just a dream. I moved out 2 weeks later. But sometimes, even in my new place, I'll get a Ring notification in the middle of the night. And every time before I open it, I hesitate. Because I can't shake the feeling that one day, I'm going to see him again. Not at the door, not on the porch, but already inside. I used to rent a small cabin outside of Asheville, North Carolina. It was tucked away in the woods, the kind of place people usually get for a vacation, not long-term living. But I was working remotely, and the price was right, so I thought, why not? The cabin was cozy, a single bedroom, a fireplace, creaky wooden floors. It felt quiet, almost too quiet sometimes, but the landlord warned me the place was old, so I expected the occasional noise. What I didn't expect was the crawl space. It was in the bedroom closet, a small square door near the floor, with an old rusted latch keeping it shut. When I asked about it, the landlord chuckled and said it was just for pipes, nothing to worry about. But the first night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A faint clicking sound like metal tapping against metal. When I got up to check, the latch on the crawlspace door was shaking. For the first few weeks, I convinced myself it was just air pressure or the house settling. But the noises got worse. Sometimes it sounded like something crawling. Other times, whispers. So faint I couldn't tell if they were real or just my imagination. One night, I finally set up my Ring camera inside the bedroom, pointed directly at the crawlspace door. I told myself I'd catch whatever animal was making the noise and prove it was nothing. The first 2 nights, nothing happened. But on the third, the footage made my skin crawl. At 2:17 in the morning, the camera picked up the sound of scratching. The crawlspace door began to tremble, and then, slowly, the latch lifted, on its own. The door creaked open just a few inches, not enough to see inside, but enough to know something was there. I watched the clip over and over, my heart racing. By the time I worked up the nerve to check in person, the latch was sealed shut again. For the next week, I tried to ignore it, but the noises kept happening. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of footsteps, light, quick, just beyond that door. One morning, after another sleepless night, I snapped. I grabbed a flashlight, unlatched the crawlspace door, and pulled it open. A wave of cold, damp air rushed out. The space was bigger than I expected, stretching under the floorboards. The beam of my flashlight caught something at the far end, a pile of old blankets, food wrappers, and what looked like a stack of notebooks. It wasn't for pipes. Someone had been living down there. I crawled in just far enough to grab one of the notebooks. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, page after page, describing me. What I wore each day, what I ate, when I left the cabin, when I went to bed. The last entry was from the night before. It said, "He set up a camera. I don't like that he's watching me." I dropped the notebook and scrambled out, slamming the crawlspace door shut. My hands shook as I shoved the latch closed. That night I stayed awake, staring at the door, waiting for it to move, but it never did. The next morning I went to pack my things, but when I opened the closet, the door was gone. The latch, the hinges, the crawlspace itself, all of it sealed behind fresh wooden planks that hadn't been there the night before. I called the landlord immediately, panicked, demanding answers. But when he picked up, his tone was calm. Too calm. He said, "That part of the cabin doesn't exist. Must have been a dream." I hung up and left without another word. To this day, I don't know who was under that cabin with me, or how they sealed the crawlspace so quickly. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I still hear it. That faint clicking sound of a latch, metal on metal, from somewhere just out of sight.